So, have you ever done drugs?
Yes, I have.
What drugs have you done?
I've done a bunch of different drugs. I've smoked weed. I've done acid, mushrooms, Molly, some different prescription pills, and coke.
And out of these, what have you preferred?
Well, I honestly smoke weed like as like a recreational thing, but for an occasional thing, I like to do Molly.
Alright, and like, out of these experiences of doing drugs, like, was it mostly enjoyable?
Yeah, it's always been a pretty good experience. I haven't really had too many bad experiences.
And like, why did you start like trying out drugs, like using them in the first place? It was like a social thing, or just?
It was just me being bored with life and being curious and just a social pressure to do it.
Right.
Have you ever done drugs?
Yes, I've done drugs.
What have you done?
I've done cocaine, marijuana, MDMA, MDA, LSD, magic mushrooms, benzodiazepines, opiates, and we'll call it that.
What have you preferred?
DMT is fun. Cannabis obviously is the go-to, and then LSD and shrooms are always a good time.
Was it enjoyable?
It was all very enjoyable. I can only think of one occasion out of the many that it was even slightly not enjoyable.
Have you ever done drugs?
Yes.
What drugs have you done?
Marijuana.
Was it enjoyable?
Yes, very.
What did you start using? Socially? You felt pressure?
I have sleeping problems and it helps me sleep at night.
Interesting.
Have you ever done drugs?
Yeah.
Alright. Which drugs that you're willing to name have you done, and which have you preferred?
Preference, weed overall.
Interview.
So weed, I'll say alcohol, and I'll just go with other prescription medications.
Okay. Was it... Well, that's probably goes with that question, but was it enjoyable?
I mean, it wouldn't be enjoyable. I mean, I wouldn't take it if it wasn't enjoyable.
Why did you start using? Like, was it social? Was it, I just feel like I want to get high?
Yeah, it's like peer pressure.
Okay.
Alright, so you say that you use marijuana as like recreational, so how well do you like know your dealer?
My dealer is like my best friend.
Alright.
Well, I have multiple, but I mean, my main guy, I guess, would be like my best friend.
And so how does that like relationship affect your use of
I mean, it affects it drastically. Makes it really easy to get what I want when I want, and even if I don't have money, I can still get it because it's my best friend. So.
How well do you know your dealer?
Depends
Is it
on what
personal or business?
Depends on what drug I'm buying, depending on the dealer.
Okay.
How well do you know your drug dealer?
Very well. He lives 2 floors above me.
How well do you know your dealer?
Like here.
Like, what kind of... Whichever dealers you interact with, like, what's your relationship
Alright,
with them?
here I got a middleman, so I don't even know my dealer. And then at home, I know them. It's like my best friend. So.
Okay. Does that affect how much or the way you use it all?
I mean, how much? Because it'll hook me up with more because it's my best friend.
Okay.
Right. Alright. And then do you think that drugs are like normal, like in today's like society? Do you think they're like normalized, or that they'd be considered like abnormal or like strange to do drugs?
I think it's becoming a lot more normal. I think it was more of a thing that was frowned upon, but now with the coming of people doing more drugs and more, I think it's becoming a lot more normalized.
Do you think that doing drugs is normal or strange?
I think it's very normal
It's very
in
normal.
today's society because it's almost legal in like other states. It is legal in other states.
Do you think that drugs in college here around us are normal or more outside of what most people are doing?
I think in IU it's very normal.
Yeah. How about in general society?
Depending on what type of drugs, but somewhat normal.
And what are your opinion on dealers?
I really don't have anything wrong with dealers as long as their money isn't going into the black market for illegal stuff that I don't approve of, like human trafficking or stuff like that. I mean, as long as it's all going back into the drug game, I guess that's okay with me.
And have you ever, like, yourself, like, thought of dealing any type of drug or done it?
Yeah, I dealt weed for a couple months. Yeah, for a couple months.
And what was, like, your reason for doing it?
My reason for doing it, I provided like a lot of relationships for me, good friendships, and also a lot of like free weed came along with it, and just being able to smoke a lot more, so a lot of money as well.
Right. So what's your, like, opinion on people who use drugs? Like, do you think there's, like, a stereotype that people who use drugs are just
I mean, it just depends on who's stereotyping who, because some people don't use drugs at all and are completely okay with people who use drugs, and some people don't use drugs at all and hate people who use drugs. So, I mean, I guess it really just depends on who's looking at who.
So your opinion, you're just like...
My opinion, I mean, obviously I'm okay with anybody who wants to use drugs. I'm okay with anybody who decides not to. I respect either way, so...
True. What is your opinion on dealers? What kind of people do you think they usually are?
I think it can range from being a really good person who's good at school and who has their self together, or it can be someone who is not in school and needs money, and that's the only way of getting it.
What about drug users?
I think it depends too. Similar to drug dealers, it can be people like me who have myself together and go to school and still have use drugs, or people who just dedicate their entire life to drugs.
Cool.
What's your opinion on, like, dealers? Like, what do you think? Do you have any, like, preconceived notions about the people who tend to deal versus everyone else?
It depends on what they're dealing. Like, almost every weed dealer I've met, though, is, like, real chill and nice.
Okay.
But, like, if you're trying to, like, buy some hardcore shit, then it's, like, sketchy.
And then do you think that, like, there's a general, like, idea of what a drug dealer is in the general population, and do you think that matches up to what reality gives you?
No, not at all.
What about for users? All the same questions.
What?
Like, for people who are using, take your pick of whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, like the
Yeah, like, are there preconceived notions within the population of them? What kind of people do you think they are?
I don't think there's as many preconceived notions, because you see, like, so many people dealing that you wouldn't even expect.
Yeah.
And are there any drugs that you personally would never do?
Don't think I'd ever fuck with heroin or meth. Those seem pretty wild. I don't think I'd ever venture out into those lands.
So those are the reasons, like, what are the main reasons?
Just because of the negative effects that they have. Like I said, I haven't really had any negative effects from drugs yet, so I'm not trying to experience those.
Okay, are there drugs that you would never do? And why?
Yes, crack cocaine, PCP, heroin, meth, crocodile, a derivative of heroin.
Why would you not do any of this?
And bath salts, because they're stupid and you'll die. And
you don't
fake
think
marijuana. Fake marijuana is very bad for you also. That's horrible.
Are there drugs that you would never do?
Yes. I don't think I would do any other drugs other than marijuana.
Why do you think this?
Because I think that they are a lot more harmful than marijuana is.
Are there any drugs that you would never do?
Heroin, meth.
Like, how do you feel about, like, prescription drugs versus non-prescribed? Like, do you think it's okay that people, like, a lot of college kids use, like, other kids' Adderalls or, like, take other prescription drugs that, like, aren't prescribed to them? And how do you think, like is that different from people, or worse from non-prescribed, I guess?
I don't know. There's a difference between abusing that and just taking somebody's thing. There's a difference between getting blacked out on somebody's Xanax and using somebody's Adderall to help you pass your, your
Right.
chemistry final. There's definitely a huge fine line. So I mean, it just depends at what extent you're abusing the drug on.
And what do you think about prescription drugs versus non-prescribed drugs and taking them?
I think it's stupid to mess around with prescription drugs because they're prescription drugs for a reason.
A lot of those prescription drugs are way worse than like actual illegal drugs if you take them illegal, like as not how they're supposed to be meant to be taken. Like, Xanax or something like that, real bad.
What do you think of like the actual process of like what would you classify not on what they do, but like which is worse, taking a prescription drug recreationally or just regularly doing non-prescription drugs?
Regularly, prescription drugs? Yeah, I mean, it depends what kind of illegal drugs you're doing, like heroin, like that's way worse, but yeah, I mean, definitely prescription drugs over something like weed. Because like painkillers, super addictive, and that becomes like your lifestyle.